A 2,000 host deployment took 45 minutes. The team blamed network latency, but the real culprit was Ansible's default configuration. Here's exactly why. Welcome to TheCodeForge. Before we dig into that production issue, let's cover Ansible performance tuning. Ansible performance tuning adjusts configuration and playbook patterns to minimize execution time, reduce controller resource consumption, and increase throughput when managing many hosts. The core areas are parallelism, SSH optimization, strategy plugins, async tasks, and fact caching. The fork setting controls how many hosts run a task in parallel. The default is 5, which is absurdly low for any environment with more than a handful of servers. Increasing forks is the single most impactful change you can make. In Ansible, CFG, set forks to a higher value. You can also use the environment variable Ansible forks. Start with 50 and scale up while monitoring controller resources. SSH Pipelining reduces the number of SSH operations required to execute a module. Without pipelining, Ansible sends the module file via SFTP, then executes it via SSH. With pipelining, it sends the module as part of the SSH session, eliminating the separate file transfer. Enable pipelining in Ansible, CFG. This requires that requiretty be disabled in sudoers on managed hosts, otherwise you'll get sudo errors. ControlMaster allows multiplexing multiple SSH sessions over a single TCP connection. Without it, each task opens a new TCP connection. With ControlMaster, the first task opens the connection and subsequent tasks reuse it. Add these SSH args to Ansible, CFG. ControlPersist keeps the connection open for 60 seconds after the last session. Adjust based on task duration. Ansible's strategy plugin determines how tasks are executed across hosts. Linear waits for all hosts to complete a task before moving to the next. Free allows each host to progress independently. Host-pinned is like free, but ensures tasks on the same host run consecutively. Set strategy in Ansible, CFG, or per playbook. Free reduces runtime for independent hosts, but can cause race conditions if tasks aren't idempotent. Async tasks allow Ansible to start a long-running operation and move on without waiting. Set async to the maximum expected time and poll, 0 to fire and forget. Later, check status with async status. This example starts a 30-second sleep asynchronously with a 60-second timeout and no polling. Then it checks the status using async status in a loop until finished. By default, Ansible gathers facts at the start of every playbook run. Fact caching stores facts between runs, so they are only gathered once per cache timeout. Redis is faster and handles concurrent access better than jsonfile. Enable smart gathering and Redis caching. Set timeout to 86,400 seconds, 24 hours. Use gathering equals smart to only gather facts if the cache is missing or expired. The Profile Tasks Callback plugin prints the execution time of each task at the end of the playbook. This is invaluable for identifying bottlenecks. Enable Profile Tasks in Ansible, CFG. Run your playbook and review the summary. Tasks with the highest cumulative time are your targets for optimization. Here's a production-tested Ansible, CFG that incorporates all the tuning discussed. Tune forks based on your controller's CPU and ulimit. Use free strategy only if tasks are independent. Remove callback whitelist for production runs. This is the full production Ansible, CFG. Test with a small batch before rolling out. Keep a backup of your original config. This is the same issue we highlighted at the start. Here's exactly why that happened. The default forks meant only 5 hosts were processed at a time. Pipelining was disabled, causing 3 SSH connections per task per host. With 2,000 hosts and 20 tasks, that's 120,000 SSH connections. ControlMaster was also disabled, so each connection was a full TCP handshake. Many hosts timed out with timeout waiting for privilege escalation. The fix was to set forks equals 100, enable pipelining equals true, and add SSH args equals oControlMaster equals auto oControlPersist equals 60s. We also disabled requiretty in sudoers on all managed hosts. The same playbook ran in under 4 minutes. The incident was caused by default forks equals 5 and pipelining not enabled. This is the single worst line. Forks always override defaults for production. Setting forks too high can overwhelm the controller's CPU, memory, and file descriptor limits. Each fork uses a separate SSH process. Always check ulimit n before increasing forks. Pipelining requires requiretty to be disabled. If it's enabled, you'll get pseudo errors. Fix by adding defaults requiretty to sudoers. Free strategy can expose non-idempotent tasks. If two hosts write to a shared file concurrently, you'll get corruption. Ensure tasks are idempotent before switching to free. The profile tasks callback adds overhead. Remove it from Ansible. CFG for production runs to avoid performance impact. Long ControlPersist values can leave stale sockets if hosts reboot. Set ControlPersist to 60s to avoid accumulation. Async tasks with poll 0 return immediately, but the job runs in the background. If you never check the status, failures go unnoticed. Always use async status if the result matters. JSONfile can have file locking issues when multiple Ansible processes write to the same file. Use readies for production environments with concurrent runs. The article mentions Mitogen as an alternative SSH mechanism. Provide a concrete example of enabling Mitogen in Ansible, CFG, and a note on its current maintenance status. In Ansible 2.1 and later, the callback whitelist setting was renamed to callbacks enabled. The article uses the older name, which still works but is deprecated. Update to callbacks enabled equals profile tasks for forward compatibility. The article mentions batch processing with loop control batch, but does not show a complete example. Here is a working snippet that runs a long script in batches of 50 hosts using async and check status. When using ControlMaster with multiple users or playbooks, socket file collisions can occur. The article sets ControlPath equals /tmp/ansible %%h%%p%%r to avoid this, but it's worth noting that %% is required in Ansible, CFG because % is a special character. In a playbook or command line, use single %. To diagnose issues, check ulimit n to ensure enough file descriptors. Verify pipelining is enabled by running with VVV and grepping for pipelining. List ControlMaster sockets to check for stale ones. Use profile tasks to find slow tasks. Let's run through some common interview questions. Default forks value 5, problematic for large envs. What does SSH pipelining require? Requiretty disabled in sudoers. Compare linear, free, host pinned. Linear waits for all, free independent, host pinned local order. And a few frequently asked questions. What forks value to start with? Start with 100, monitor CPU and ulimit. Does pipelining work with become? Yes, but requiretty must be disabled. Can I use ControlMaster with sudo? Yes, but specify ControlPath. To recap, increase forks based on controller capacity. Enable SSH pipelining and disable requiretty. Use ControlMaster with a short ControlPersist. Switch to free strategy for independent hosts. Use async for long-running tasks. Cache facts in readies. Profile to find bottlenecks, but remove profiling in production. Always test with a small batch first. Ready to go deeper? Up next, Ansible linting and testing with Molecule, then Ansible Windows automation, then Ansible network automation. Find them all at TheCodeForge.io. Thanks for watching. The full article and code examples are covered in detail at TheCodeForge.io.